Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer Zarate with CRNtv, joined by Cheryl Stookes, Vice President of Marketing at Soft Toys and author of The Token Woman. Thank you for joining me today, Cheryl.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
And it's great to have you on, and some exciting news following the launch of your new book, The Token Woman. Let's start with this. Can you talk about the inspiration behind the book?
Yeah, thanks. Well, the book is relatively recent. I actually wrote it last summer, so it's a COVID project. And my inspiration was, for the first time in my entire career, I actually had a bit of a pause in my career, and I had the opportunity to write it.
So putting your life experiences within the tech industry down on paper, what's the takeaway here? What do you want readers to walk away with?
Early on in my career, what I found was, as I started off in sales leadership, and the higher up that I went, I was often the only woman in a room full of men. That was a very, very common occurrence for me. And I kind of just thought that was normal. I remember being promoted to my first director level role in 2012. And I walked into the very first director meeting and I looked around the room and I wondered when the token woman was going to show up. And then I realized that was me. That was the role I was going to play. So for so long in my career, I had to sort of navigate as being the only woman, or the token woman, if you will. And, I've always been a big advocate of other women and trying to lift up other women in the industry to become in more leadership positions, because there's still not enough of us. We're still greatly outnumbered. And me putting pen on paper was just a formal way for me to try to give some real practical advice to women that are in the industry, or maybe thinking about the industry, in sales or sales leadership.
And to build on that, can you talk more about why it's important to mentor women in IT?
It's just been something that I've always really taken a lot of pleasure in, and a lot of personal satisfaction of finding those high potential individuals, and whenever I can, taking them under my wing. And again, going back to, how I could do that at scale, that was really deciding to write The Token Woman, so that a lot of women in the industry, or thinking about getting in the industry in sales leadership, could read that and learn from that. So it was really, how can I do this at scale? Because it's a big commitment and it takes a lot of time. So I'm constantly thinking of things that I can do more broadly to help others. Things like this interview, hopefully people will watch it and pick up a few things along the way, both women and men.
Now, can you talk about the challenges women in this industry face, and what advice you would give to both women and men who are tuning in?
I've got one that I would bet all my money that has happened to every single woman who's ever worked in corporate. And it's being in a meeting, having an idea, and having that idea either ignored or overlooked. And then about 30 seconds later, typically a man, saying that same thing, maybe in a slightly different way, but essentially the same thing. And then everybody in the meeting jumping on what a great idea that person had. And you sitting there thinking, well, what the heck? I literally just said that. I think that happens so often to women in meetings, and it's probably one of the most frustrating things. So that's the situation. Now the solution, and this is when women have to help each other out. And it's a tip that I learned a few years back, and it's called amplification. So Jennifer, if you're in a meeting and I see that happening to you, and you make a great suggestion and it gets overlooked or it gets ignored, and then let's say 30 seconds later, your coworker, I'll call him John, says basically that same thing, and everyone jumps on it and says, what a great idea, John. What I'm going to do is say, thank you, John, for supporting Jennifer's idea. I agree, it was fantastic. And let's definitely do that. Great job, Jennifer. Right? So practically speaking, it's amplifying the person, typically the woman, that gave the suggestion in the first place, and making sure that we're recognizing that. So this is one that as women, we always have to be on the lookout for, to make sure that we're amplifying each other in meetings. So this one requires a bit of a village approach.
And I love that, amplifying each other. And I'm sure an eye-opener for John in this situation, like, oh wow, I guess we're on the same page.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it goes the other way too. Like, that is something I quite often get asked, what can men do to support women? If you can amplify a woman in a meeting, that makes such a difference in terms of the culture that the team will have, and the team that you're building, and the women on your team will really appreciate that.